Bugs Bunny.
You were expecting maybe the Easter Bunny?
Welcome back to the Backwards History Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Will, here with my co-host, Kevin. Say hi, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Shut up, Kevin.
You would say that from a safe distance.
Yeah, by safe distance, Kevin, means that we have succumbed to quarantine and we are having to record remotely. So if you notice anything different in the sound quality, that's why. We apologize, and we do plan to be back to normal as soon as we possibly can, because this is awful.
It has been a difficult time. A lot of adjustments have been made. So hopefully soon we'll have some kind of resolution.
But as far as adjustments go, this one right here is a bit of a first world problem.
Yeah. You put it in perspective like that, you're right.
Right. So we can complain, but we're doing all right.
Who wants to hear it, right?
So speaking of doing all right, before we get started, I want to let everybody know that we do have a Facebook page, the Backwards History Podcast. Go ahead and give us a like and drop us a comment or a post. We also have Instagram, Twitter, and be sure to go check out Mike Ramsey Music for the intro and outro music. And he just dropped an album, I believe it was Friday.
I think so, yeah.
Poor dude didn't get to do his release party. He had to do a live stream from his house. And we typically try to help him out with a watch party on our Facebook page. But yeah, just go give us likes and subscribes. And don't forget to drop a review and a 5-star rating on iTunes for us. That helps out a lot. But this is going to be the next part of our Pagan Roots, I guess, series that we've been doing, considering that Friday was Good Friday. It's going to be Easter, baby. I'm going to let Kevin take the reins on this and get this rolling. Kevin?
Thank you, William. No, I was just thinking, you said here as always with my co-host Kevin, but I'm actually not there, am I?
I almost stopped myself to say, semi here or here in spirit.
I'm always there in spirit.
Spirit. Easter
spirit.
Joke.
Air quotes.
Air quotes, right.
As William did mention, this will be the next installment in the Pagan Roots series. Sadly, it will be the last, as we've come full circle with all the different holidays, modern day holidays that have pagan roots that go deep. Easter, no exception, is actually very, very rich in pagan history.
I think Easter was the first one you wanted to do to begin with when we started this pagan roots thing. Easter was the one you've been talking about the whole time.
Right. Well, Easter is one there's so many aspects to it that you can't directly link to Christianity, just like on the surface. Christianity has a lot of iconography. You have, the cross and the dove and things like that are very noticeable, and you see it like, oh, that's Christian. Easter, though, you have, rabbits and eggs, and I don't think rabbits lay eggs, and just one of those things like how is this all connected to the resurrection story? And that's one I really it has this great history, and that's one I'm happy we're finally here, because we started with Halloween way back in October, and I had to bide my time, and all right, we got to hit the big three, as they're called, and then we finally come here. We're gonna finish strong now.
Well, to be clear, this is the end of it for now. Quotes, for now.
Now, Easter, one thing that I noticed as a child was it's always on a different day. It's always Sunday, but it was never on the same day of the month or the year, or the month and the day of the week. And I was like, well, why is that? And no one could ever really quite explain it to me as a child. asked a lot of questions, upset a lot of people. But Easter has this year it'll be April 12th, 2020. But it's what's known as a movable feast. It's one that it occurs after certain celestial things have lined up, and I'll get into that here.
You could call them celestial prerequisites.
That's really good. That's exactly what it is.
Right?
So Easter falls between March 22nd and April 25th. Now, typically what it does is it's the first Sunday after the first full moon occurring on or after the spring equinox. Let me tell you that one more time because it sets up kind of like a movie, well, after the first sunrise after the third Wednesday, kind of.
I feel like we're hunting for like the Lost Ark or something.
Right. You gotta. Everything has to line up just right. But one more time, it typically falls between March 22nd, April 25th, and it's the first Sunday after the first full moon occurring on or after the spring equinox. Now, the spring equinox is just first day of spring, which plays heavily into spring. Is we're coming out of winter. We have this new life, this rebirth, a resurrection, if you will, air quotes. Now, that's on the Gregorian calendar. And for our dedicated listeners, I've mentioned the difference between the Gregorian calendar and the Julian calendar. In the Western Hemisphere, Western civilization, kind of, we're Americans, we're Western, a lot of Western Europe. We follow the Gregorian calendar. Now, the Eastern Orthodox Church, they follow the Julian calendar, which, if you listened before, you understand Julian calendar was created by Julius Caesar. And their Easter falls between April 4th and May 8th. So a little different, just because they have a different calendar. So the Roman Catholics use the Gregorian calendar because it was created by Pope Gregory, go figure. And the Eastern Orthodox Christians to go with the Julian calendar. So that's one of the more complicated aspects is figuring out which day Easter falls on each year. I do not envy those calendar makers. Like, hey, what day is Easter this year? Let me figure this out real quick. Let me check my lunar charts.
But before we get into the explanation, just the fact of where it has to land should kind of give a hint to the pagan-esque roots of it, or the purely pagan roots of it, because the fact that it has to do with an equinox, a moon phase, particular dates that are movable as opposed to one date it happened here, like Christmas, always December 25th.
That's a really good tie-in. As with all our Pagan Root series, as I've explained throughout this first year of the podcast, Christianity comes in, and to help with this change, you got to understand, you have generations of people who have been have their own indigenous religions or their pagan religions all way thousands and thousands of years back. So they're not just gonna drop one tradition and pick up new ones. So that to help ease that change, we'll keep certain aspects. And
it's a good way to have a revolt on your hands if you just walk into a place like, okay, now that y'all are with us, all of your stuff doesn't matter. You're gonna do our thing.
Exactly. It helps peaceful transition. It wasn't always peaceful, but it certainly helped to kind of ease people into things. Change is not always well accepted, especially if you're getting rid of traditions that have been around for thousands of years, generation after generation. But yes, you do have this holiday follows the lunar cycle. Many ancient religions, the solar calendar, it's a little harder to track. But the lunar calendar, because you have your different lunar phases, it's a lot easier to keep up with that one. And so many what are referred to as pagan groups, ancient groups, tracking the moon's movement is a lot easier than the sun. And then if you ever looked at the sun, you realize looking at the moon's a lot easier on your eyes.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. I remember a few years ago we had the eclipse. I read an article about all the people who, despite everyone's recommendation of not to stare at the sun directly, did it anyway, and there was a lot of uh, eye injuries reported during that day.
And per usual, there was plenty of misinformation out there on the best way, the best DIY way to look at it was with like some like 3D glasses and like
Oh yeah.
multiple layers of like film negative, if you even had any of that available
I'm about to
anymore.
say, where are you going to get that at?
Right? The best method that I got to use that day was someone had a welding helmet, and
Oh,
it
nice.
was awesome. Yeah, you
Yeah,
could see it clear as day, and no strain on your eyes. It was great.
I had a buddy had like a really nice camera he had set up to look at it, so you didn't look at it directly. He got some amazing shots of it too.
That's cool.
But yeah, don't look directly at the sun. That's bad.
Very bad.
So we covered the day, how you pick it, why it's different groups, and all that. Let's get into the name. The name Easter. That's one again, just on the surface, you don't see a direct connection with Christianity. Once Christianity spread to Europe, it got what's known as Anglicanized, where they started giving folks different names and things change. Now this is one where not all historians agree on where the name comes from or where it originated, how it evolved. But the one that many or most historians agree on, it's based off an Anglo-Saxon goddess of, go figure, spring and fertility. That theme's popping up again there.
It's like every holiday is about fertility.
Like back in the day, the infant mortality rate was just astronomically high. So
it would stand to reason you would take as many shots as you could and hope for the best.
Exactly, and I mean that may sound crude to modern people, but like I've told our listeners before, you can't look at the past through 21st century lenses. You have to try to put yourself in the mindset of the people at the time.
I would say it is what it is, but in this instance, it was what it was. So
it's just that's life sometimes, Anyway, the Anglo-Saxon goddess Eostre or Eostra, goddess of spring and fertility. And it's interesting that the goddess is of Anglo-Saxon origins. Many of the pagan traditions that found their way into Christianity today, many originated from the European continent, which now Anglo-Saxons, a lot of migration over the years, but are primarily associated with the British Isles. So it's interesting that they kind of narrowed it down more so towards one goddess, because usually it's what do they call it, an archetype, one that's you'll have like a similar goddess or god that is based off of, but this one it's very specified that it's of Anglo-Saxon. Like while many groups had gods and goddesses of fertility and things like that, that's what the archetype is. But this is just to be a little more specific, which is why many historians believe it holds a little more credence. But that's the name there. Very, it like I said, not directly linked to Christianity, just on the surface.
just very on the nose. Eostar and Easter.
Yeah, you're not much of a stretch on that one. And the one thing that always I couldn't quite understand about Easter were the rabbits and the eggs. Because if you look at just the rabbits and the eggs, there's no connection. It's like, well, what is this?
Rabbits don't lay eggs, bruh.
Exactly. Rabbits have, for thousands of years, in many ancient societies, have always been a symbol of fertility. Rabbits are very
active.
let's go with active. Very prolific.
Right. We'll go with the safe option there.
And it's one of the animals that ancient people observed as being prolific. But around springtime, you start to see a lot of rabbits out in the field. They're being born and going out on their own. So like, all right, rabbits. So you got rabbits as a symbol of fertility. You see them being very fertile during the springtime. Again, that theme shows up: spring and fertility. Now the egg. That's one that is. I just if you just look at it and you're like, why are we painting eggs and hiding them to celebrate the resurrection of the Messiah? Like what's going on with that one? You know. But eggs themselves have always been seen as a symbol of fertility. So
You
the
don't
mistake
say.
I do. Now the mistake I made as a young man was thinking that the rabbits and the eggs were related to one another when in fact they were both related to fertility. And so that's where I think a lot of people get confused is, why do we have the Easter bunny who paints eggs and hides them, and it's one of those things that you have to kind of dig down beneath the surface to really see how these are all connected. Well, yeah, so the common thing we're seeing throughout this whole thing with Easter, spring and fertility. So, well, what does spring and fertility have to do with, the Son of God? Well, as many people know, if you ever watched the Charlie Brown Christmas special, the most accepted version of the crucifixion and resurrection story is Christ was crucified, laid in a tomb. 3 days later, he miraculously rose from the dead. So you start to see the theme of death and rebirth, which is what you kind of see when you go from winter to spring. You have winter, it's cold, it's dark, nothing's growing, nothing's alive. And then spring comes and you start to see life return. It's almost like the world itself is resurrecting.
And one of those forms of life is new life, which an egg is new life. If it's a fertilized egg, but we're not going to get into the science.
Yeah, it's a little out of my field of expertise there.
Neither one of us are biologists or pretend to be.
No, I don't even know how I would pretend to be a biologist. I know that little about it.
Right.
But yes, that is in a nutshell, and get a little thematic here in an eggshell.
Shut up, Kevin.
Hey, we've already done that part. that is.
I can never do it too many times.
Yeah, you're probably right. I warrant it at least a dozen times a day, I'm sure.
Right?
But that is the pagan roots of Easter, where there's just so much connected, but not as strongly tied to Christianity as such as Christmas is. Easter is one that confuses a lot of people, especially like me when I was young. I didn't understand. We paint eggs. It was an ancient tradition to paint eggs red to represent the blood of Christ, which that itself is very, very strong imagery you find throughout Christianity.
So that's a very Catholic thing to do.
Well, Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, Protestant. There's a lot.
However,
yeah,
didn't start with that.
Oh no, nothing ever started with that.
In my Kevin's research prior to recording this episode, there's evidence or potential evidence of cultures from, 60,000 years ago?
Oh yeah.
That were coloring ostrich eggs in Africa.
I just think I always had fun as a child coloring like chicken eggs and stuff. If I could get my hands on an ostrich egg to decorate,
that's a huge egg.
Right,
that'd be great.
Like a lot of fun. Like I've seen artwork where people have taken ostrich eggs and carved into them because they're very, very thick, very sturdy, and it's just amazing and beautiful artwork. I mean, I couldn't do it any justice.
Not
I
gonna
can
lie,
only.
I'd be more interested in the omelet that you can make because I've seen videos people making
Oh,
omelets and eggs with an ostrich egg, and that
an
just looks
omelet.
like it'd be great. It'd be like an omelet for my whole family off of one egg.
Man, just be careful trying to get that egg, though. From what I
Whew, that thing will
understand,
run you down at like 35 miles an hour.
imagine seeing something like that coming at you, like what the?
Right.
But,
But speaking of things moving,
moving.
one thing this year that I'm assuming and probably true, that's going to be canceled, that's Easter related, is the yearly Easter egg roll that's
At
held
the
at the
White
White
House.
House lawn.
Hmm.
And because of the current goings on, it's most likely canceled. But the history of the Easter roll tradition,
Hmm.
because it's much older than the White House and that, but the history of it is to symbolize the stone being rolled away from Jesus's tomb, because it was a giant. The story, if you're not Christian and you don't know the story, is that on the third day, people went to go visit the grave or visit the tomb, from the outside, obviously. But there was a giant stone that was rolled in front of it to seal it, and it had been rolled away like it was nothing to reveal an empty tomb. So the egg roll, which is a race where you roll the egg, people roll the egg, and whoever gets to the end wins. Whoever gets to the end fastest wins. But that's the symbolism there.
Interesting.
It goes
Egg.
along with the red colored eggs and things like that. So
It's as an adult now, it is a tradition of the coloring eggs with the children, and I always
well,
like to go hide the eggs, like because you got to be real careful not to hide them too well, but the kids can't find them.
I've hit them
she,
so well that I couldn't find them. My mom cheats. My mom has some textured eggs, like they're done up like camouflage. She's got some literal camouflage ones, but then she's got other ones that are textured. Some they're all plastic, but it's
oh,
ridged so it looks like grass, and she's got one that's ridged that looks like a rock
oh wow,
and dirt and all kinds of stuff. She hides them in her yard, and it is a pain in the butt to find these things, and she loves it. There's nothing she loves more about Easter than hiding those particular eggs.
bet.
Speaking of the eggs, though, we forgot to talk about Lent.
Oh
The
yes,
reason why the eggs are such a big thing after the fact.
right. Lent, which officially starts off was like the beginning of, I guess Easter. It's after,
Eastertide.
yeah.
The
You
Easter
have
season.
Ash Wednesday, which is Lent, and for any of my folks, down in New Orleans, Mardi Gras or Fat Tuesday, the day before. Typically for Lent, people give up something that they're very fond of. I know people give up all kinds of things. Chocolate, that's a big one. Um, like
I know a lot of
junk
Catholics
food.
give up meat, like
Meat's a
red
big
meat.
one. Red
Yeah.
meat. Um, so on the Tuesday, they try to get in as much as they can, which is kind of cheating, if you ask me. But so Lent starts at Wednesday. A lot of, like Will said, a lot of Catholics give up meat, which they also consider eggs to be animal products, so they won't eat eggs. Well, the thing is, you can't tell the chickens to stop laying eggs for 40 days because that's not how it works.
Well, the
So
church originally didn't they bar the consumption of eggs during Lent?
it was in the early church.
Yeah, the early Catholic Church, and then they would have a surplus of the eggs because, like Kevin just said, chickens ain't stopping. They don't give a
They,
crap about Lent.
they
So
can't
there was a
stop.
surplus of eggs once it was done. So you either had to eat them or you had to use them.
And one of
So
the ways to help preserve egg, go ahead and boil it. I won't preserve it forever. If you ever had an old boiled egg, you understand that, real quick when it goes bad. But
real quick.
that's one of these practical things of, well, how can we fix this? I don't know. Let's make a fun game out of it. Let's let the kids, you know sit down and do arts and crafts with it while they're learning about Christianity. spending time with their family, just a good time. Um, and that's what, as you become an adult, even non-Christians, Easter is a very popular secular holiday. Also, many families who don't practice Christianity or don't practice it very often, Easter's still a big family holiday. An old joke in the Southeast that only time you see folks at church is on Easter and Christmas. The
You ain't
doors,
wrong.
the pews are packed on those 2 days of the year, but sadly this year that won't be the case with the shutdown and all the social distancing requirements and curfews and just all kinds of rules you have to go by before you go out your house to get necessities. Unfortunately, large gatherings are strongly discouraged.
Well, to be fair, by the time this is posted, there may have been Easter gatherings. We just don't know about them yet.
That's a very fair point. I know I've seen a lot of stories on the news about
people
church,
wanting to defy the orders.
Right. And then law enforcement trying to maintain order as it is, like trying to strongly advise against it. But and during this time, you always have people who exaggerate stories and make things up just to get attention. Like you have people telling stories like, "Oh, the cops are gonna come by and take down everybody's tag number who's in the church parking lot."
There actually was a church that was bothered last weekend.
Oh yeah.
There was a church with the gathering, and the cops were like, went to the pastor and was like, we're going to give your parishioners a little bit of time to get out of here, but then we're going to start writing citations.
Right. I know a local church where we live is doing where you pull up in the parking lot, but you don't actually get out of your car.
Yeah, it's like a drive-in church.
Yeah, they have a radio station everybody turns to, and you can hear the pastor speak, but you don't have to expose yourself or potentially expose others, which I thought was a very creative solution.
Well, you've got live streaming and stuff that a lot of them are doing now too.
Right.
I think we've said all we aim to say on this one. Like I said earlier, this is the end of the Pagan Roots for now. It's the end of it as a series. We may pop up with some stuff if we come across anything. We do hate we missed last week, but we intend to keep this rolling, barring Kevin's internet issues. That's what held us up last week.
Or getting caught away on digs. So,
as always, we don't want you to take our word for anything. We're just two dudes with two individual microphones this time. So we want you to do your own research, form your own opinions, trust, but verify.